Hey guys, good evening. It's just another collector. It's Tuesday, April the 14th, and I'm just sharing with you another spectacular Spider-Man set. This was the Child Within series that came out in summer 91 to early 92. Featured in Spectacular Spider-Man number 178, 179, 180, 181, 182, and 183. 6 parts, but also they had the issue after 183. They had this they call it the aftermath, kind of like the epilogue. It took place maybe days or maybe a week or so after all the events that took place in in parts 1 to 6. So one thing I wanted to say about this one, this is another kind of a nostalgic issue for me. This is one of the early Spider-Mans that I read when I was a kid. And I actually remember this particular one. This is January 1992. I actually remember going to the mini mart and actually picking this off the rack when it was actually current, where the newsstand was. And just wanted to take this out real quick. And I was 9 years old at the time when I read this. And so not only is this an early Spider-Man for me, but this is the first time I've seen that I would see the Green Goblin. Of course, since I was new to Spider-Man, I didn't really know any of the villains anyway. But so this is a really interesting story. But anyway, I remember actually being really young, living in New York and reading this, and I read it a few times because I just thought it was great. And I remember seeing Harry, which I didn't know, that he was the Green Goblin, and he's speaking to his son Norman, and I don't know what I was thinking then because I didn't have any background on the story, The Child Within, before this or anything, so I guess I just couldn't understand, why he was a villain, but he was like a sad guy that evidently loved his son. And I remember just reading this, like these scenes just really touched me. Like his tears are coming down, and he's hugging his son, and he's telling him he's got to go away for a while because he's got to think things out. And of course, Norman's like 5, 6 years old. He doesn't really understand. I always remember that just kind of got to me. Again, I was only 9 years old when I read this, so it's kind of expected to. When you're young, you get kind of emotional. I just wanted to share those 2 pages. That's what really got to me when I first read this. So, Child Within is probably, I think it's one of the greatest Spider-Man stories in the Spider-Man genre. And I don't think they've included this in, I have a Wizard, the Wizard magazine that used to be out years ago. They had released the greatest Spider-Man stories, and this was not in there. And I actually could never really understand that. This is a really, if you never read it, this is a really very deep, dark, and very psychological story. And of course, like I said, when I first read this one, I was 9 years old. I don't think I understood much. And anyway, this was after it, so you don't really have too much of what went on before that. So anyway, after I read that, and a few years later when I moved to Pennsylvania, I remember I picked up, let me see. I picked up part 5, part 4, and I think part 3. And I guess I was about 14 maybe then. And again, I don't think I really realized how psychological it was. And then a few years after that, I finally picked up 1, 2, and 6. But anyway, you learn a lot about, I'm just going to leave it at this. You learn a lot about Harry Osborn, the Green Goblin, the second Green Goblin, and how he was suffering from visual and auditory hallucinations from his dead father, who was the original Green Goblin. You have Peter Parker, Spider-Man, who we find out being in a bad, he was drugged by the Green Goblin, by Harry, and we find out there's a lot of things that he's got repressed in his, in himself. And then we have another character, Vermin, who was originally Edward, I forget the last name. He was a scientist that got transformed into that, and we find out who he was before and, like, what kind of traumatic childhood he had at the hands of his father. So we know that his father was abusive to him. Harry's father was abusive to him. And you see that in these issues. And then Spider-Man's kind of like, in the middle of it, trying to fight Harry, Green Goblin, and, Vermin. So I'm not giving too many details away. You should, if you haven't read it and you're into Spider-Man, you really do need to read it. It's a very good story. Again, it's just very psychological, dark. It's kind of depressing at times, but I think it's a great series. And this is part one. It says where Kraven's last hunt ended, Vermin's hunt begins. So before this, we had Kraven's last hunt, which was like in 1988. And that kind of takes place, this kind of picks up somewhat, after that with Vermin and, some of the characters. I'll talk about that story in another day. I actually just read that again today. I haven't read that in like, I don't know how many years, 7, 8 years, and I just read it today, and that's very good as well. That one and this one, like, probably they should be at the top stories in the Spider-Man genre. I know a lot of people say that the Stacys is, a big one, and, the Sinister Six, but this is definitely something, if you haven't read it, it's definitely worth it. So that's it for now, and I will see you guys soon. Let me know, leave any comments about what you think of this, about this story. And again, thank you for those that comment. I had a few new subscribers in the past week. I do appreciate it. Thanks again, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.